Ukraine just pulled off one of its most devastating and precise drone assaults yet, striking right at the heart of Russia's military power and essentially wiping a military stronghold from the map. The target? Engels Air Base in the Saratov region of Russia, a vital hub for the Putin war machine. Now, that base is now smoldering after Ukraine struck with a horde of drones, potentially taking out some of Russia's most important bombers in the process. On March 20, ABC News was among the first to report on Ukraine's massive drone strike, confirming that Russian authorities from the Saratov Oblast had acknowledged a Ukrainian attack. The target, according to those authorities, was Engels Air Base. Located approximately 280 miles from Russia's border with Ukraine, the base lies deep in Russia's territory, which has made it vital for Putin throughout the war as a launchpad for his bombers and fighter jets. But now, that crucial piece of Russia's military strategy has been hit hard, and the fallout could change everything. Ukraine has long known just how dangerous this base is. ABC reports that Ukraine has struck the base multiple times over the last 3 years, with its most recent attack coming earlier this year. Reuters reported that the January 2025 strike targeted an oil depot serving the Engels base, setting it ablaze. That was an effective attack by Ukraine. Saratov's regional governor, Roman Busagin, told reporters that 2 Russian firefighters died trying to combat the oil depot blaze. Busagin was also forced to declare a state of emergency in the oblast, which Reuters reports has a population of 200,000 people. The Ukrainian military also lauded that strike, stating on Telegram that it creates serious logistical problems for the strategic aviation of the Russian occupiers and significantly reduces their ability to strike at peaceful Ukrainian cities and civilian objects. If that January strike was impressive, what Ukraine achieved on the night of March 20 was even more so. Details of the attack come from the Kiev Post. It says that Ukraine hit Saratov and Engels with the largest drone strike against the region since Putin invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The attack caused a fire to break out at the Engels Air Base, forcing the evacuation of staff and civilians living in a nearby rural area, according to Roman Busagin. The Astra Telegram channel also revealed images and some video footage of the attack. The pictures seem to show plumes of smoke rising into the sky from the Engels industrial base, suggesting Ukraine achieved several direct hits with its drones. The same goes for a short video, which appears to have been shot by an Engels resident, that shows smoke rising into the air. Astra also reports that secondary detonations could be heard in and around the Engels airbase. Those may have been caused by more drones that impacted valuable Russian assets, or the explosions may have been the result of a direct hit on an ammunition depot at the facility, causing valuable Russian munitions to explode. It appears that Busagin is trying to frame the drone attack as one that targeted civilians ahead of a military target. The Saratov governor claims that Ukraine's Engels strike ended up damaging around 30 homes in the city, along with a school, a hospital, and 2 kindergartens. Local media also shared images of what it claimed to be the hospital, which has shattered windows. Busagin also said that 2 civilians were injured in the attack, one of them being a woman receiving treatment at the hospital. Additionally, the attack hit an oil depot, possibly the same one Ukraine targeted back in January, causing a small blaze. Plus, schools were closed down in the region, with students switching to remote learning for the day. How true these claims are remains to be seen. It's suspicious that Busagin is claiming that Ukraine's strike targeted civilian areas when that's a strategy Russia has used and denied using since the beginning of Putin's invasion. Could Saratov's regional governor be trying to claim that Ukraine is just as guilty of targeting Russia's civilians as Russia is of killing Ukrainian citizens? Possibly. He might also be trying to distract attention away from the true impact Ukraine's strike had against the airbase. ABC also reports that the Engels strike was part of a larger drone assault against multiple Russian targets. It says Russia's media is claiming that the country's air defenses shot down 132 Ukrainian drones during the attack, 54 of which were over Engels. Russia also launched an aerial assault of its own at the same time. According to Ukraine authorities, the Ukrainian city of Kropyvnytskyi was attacked by a horde of drones, causing around 30 explosions in the city. Kupiansk was also targeted. At least 20 bombs were dropped on the city in a matter of hours, killing at least 1 civilian and injuring another. All told, Russia launched 171 drones into Ukraine on the same night as the Engels attack. Ukraine says 75 of those drones were shot down by its air defenses, with another 63 being lost in flight and failing to cause any damage. Despite both launching drone attacks on the same night, there's a clear difference between the Ukrainian and Russian strikes. For Ukraine, the Engels air base and its oil depot were the primary targets. There may have been some collateral damage if Busagin is to be believed, but it was unintentional. Russia, on the other hand, solely targeted Ukrainian cities, not military targets. Putin is trying to cause as much death and destruction in civilian areas as possible, and it seems that countering that Russian approach was Ukraine's goal with the Engels strike. That's why this attack was so important. It just made Russia's air force, at least in Engels, absolutely toothless by potentially neutralizing two of Russia's most dangerous assets, the Tu-160 and the Tu-95MS strategic bombers, since taking out an ammunition storage unit and destroying the Engels oil depot makes those bombers practically useless even if they're capable of taking to the skies. The Tu-160, which is designated as Blackjack by NATO, is a strategic bomber capable of reaching supersonic speeds. It took its maiden flight in December 1981, though it wasn't until April 1987 that it officially entered service. Russia has built 36 of them since the bomber was introduced, meaning even the loss of one or two puts a severe dent in the country's ability to drop bombs on its enemies. Worse yet for Putin, the Tu-160 is a Soviet-era bomber. That doesn't make it ineffectual. It's proven itself perfectly capable of launching glide bombs at Ukrainian targets. But its age means that many of the 36 that Russia built have fallen into disrepair or are otherwise unused by Russia's military. Only 17 of these powerful aircraft are in service, which makes the potential losses experienced at Engels even more substantial. Russia will also miss the Tu-160's capabilities. The aircraft is capable of operating in day and nighttime conditions, in addition to operating at all geographical latitudes. It's also a nuclear bomber, though Russia has been using it to launch conventional weapons. The Tu-160 is one of Russia's primary means of delivering nuclear warheads to a target, once again showcasing just how big a loss even one of these aircraft is to Putin. Perhaps the closest US equivalent to the Tu-160 is the B-1B, which America has previously integrated with Ukraine's Soviet-era fighter jets in combat training missions. In terms of missiles and bombs, the Tu-160 is usually stocked with up to 12 Kh-55MS missiles. Each missile is propelled by a turbofan and has a maximum range of 1,864 miles, more than enough to reach practically any target in Ukraine from Engels. If Putin decides to go down the nuclear route, those missiles can also be armed with a 200 kiloton warhead. That's enough power to cause serious devastation to any city. According to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, a 100 kiloton bomb dropped on New York City would lead to over 583,000 fatalities. Of course, New York is densely packed, but that statistic gives you a rough idea of just how much damage a nuke with double the yield could cause if dropped on any major city. The Tu-160 is also fast. It's capable of climbing at speeds reaching 156 miles per hour. Once high enough in the air, it can reach a maximum speed of 1,379 miles per hour, which is just under Mach 2. However, it cruises at a much slower 596 miles per hour. Add a 15-hour flight endurance into the mix, and you get a strategic bomber that packs a massive punch, can stay in the air for a long time, and offers enough range via its missiles to attack any Ukrainian target. The Tu-95MS is just as dangerous. Designated with a NATO codename Bear H, the Tu-95MS serves a dual purpose as both a strategic bomber and missile carrier. It's an enhancement over Russia's Tu-142, which is a maritime patrol craft, along with being a modernized version of Russia's older Tu-95 Bear bombers. Russia doesn't have many of these aircraft in its stockpiles. Moscow had acquired 20 of them by the end of 2016, according to Air Force Technology, which it hoped would be in service until 2040. That may not be the case anymore after Ukraine's Engels attack. It's also important to point out that modernized doesn't necessarily mean modern in 2025 terms. The prototype for the Tu-95MS was completed in September 1979, with serial production of the bomber taking place between 1981 and 1992. That's right, it's another Soviet-era aircraft that Putin brought to an invasion that he started in 2022. However, Russia has conducted several upgrades on the craft since its 1981 introduction into its air force. For instance, December 2014 saw the Russian aerospace company Tupolev deliver two of its modernized versions of the craft. It's this version that makes up the 20 that Russia had in its stockpiles prior to Ukraine's most recent strike against Engels. The Tu-95MS is a little more capable than the Tu-160 when it comes to aerial combat. It's equipped with a pair of Gryazev Shipunov 23mm automatic cannons, which are mounted to the rear of the aircraft and provide some measure of defense against incoming jets and missiles. That cannon can rattle off rounds at a rate of 2,400 per minute. However, it's not the cannons that present the biggest threat to Ukraine. The Tu-95MS missiles are far more worrying. The plane packs 6 of Russia's Kh-15 cruise missiles, which are loaded into a drum launcher and have a range of 1,553 miles, making them effective for cities in Ukraine. There's also a variant of the Tu-95MS, dubbed the Tu-95MS-6, that can be loaded with the same Kh-55 missiles the Tu-160 uses. The MS-16 variant can carry up to 16 of those missiles, making the Tu-95MS a major threat. Add to all of this the SPS-160 German jammer that's on board the bomber. That jammer provides additional protection, along with the rear cannons, from aerial threats, making the Tu-95MS difficult to shoot out of the skies. The major downside to the aircraft, at least from the Russian perspective, is that it's not as fast as the Tu-160. The Tu-95MS can only reach a top speed of 515 miles per hour, with its cruising speed dropping down to 341 miles per hour. However, it makes up for that with a 6,524-mile flight range, which is large enough for the bomber to enter Ukrainian territory, unleash its missiles or bombs, and get back to the Engels base without needing to stop for refueling. At least it was, until Ukraine took out the Engels base. However, it's not just grounding 2 of Russia's most lethal bombers that Ukraine just achieved. By grounding those bombers, it also limited Russia's ability to launch glide bombs at Ukrainian cities. Russia started using glide bombs against Ukraine in 2023, though it ramped up its usage the following year. These bombs are primitive, but have also proven remarkably effective against Ukraine's air defenses. They're made using Soviet-era Fab 1500 and Fab 500 bombs, which weigh 1.5 and 0.5 tons respectively. Russia's trick is that it attaches a special fold-out wing kit to these powerful bombs, allowing them to be launched from hundreds of miles away from a target before they glide through the air until they hit home. They're not the most precise bombs in the world. The wing kit Russia uses comes with basic satellite navigation to keep them generally on track, but they make up for that lack of precision with 2 features. They're cheap and devastating. Each wing kit only costs Russia between $20,000 and $30,000, with the bombs costing nothing. The Fabs are already in Russia's stockpiles, meaning Putin can achieve a rough equivalent of a far more expensive missile with his wing kits. The glide bombs also don't need to be super accurate. A single Fab 500 contains around 440 pounds of explosives, which is roughly equivalent to 30 of Russia's 152mm artillery shells packed into a single munition. Even when the glide bombs don't hit their target perfectly, they explode with such massive force that they turn whatever they do hit into little more than a crater in the ground. And Russia has pelted Ukraine with these terrifying weapons. In March 2024 alone, when Putin started using these bombs in earnest, Russia launched 3,000 at Ukraine cities and military facilities. It's kept up a similar monthly rate since. According to United 24 Media, Russia had hit Ukraine with 51,000 of these glide bombs by the end of February 2025. Taken over the course of the entire war, that works out to roughly 1,416 per month. Danielle Bell, who heads the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine of HRMMU, says aerial glide bombs have become one of the greatest threats to civilians in cities along the front line. They're also one of the main reasons why the number of killed and injured in 2024 increased by 30% compared with 2023. Don't underestimate the scale of death these terrible weapons deliver. HRMMU says that Russia's glide bombs killed 360 Ukrainian civilians and wounded a further 1,861 in 2024 alone. Those numbers represented a 3-fold and 6-fold increase respectively over the casualty figures from 2023. Worse yet, United 24 says that Russia's production of glide bombs is on the rise. Putin plans to raise manufacturing levels to the point where Russia produces 75,000 of these bombs annually, representing a 50% increase over the number of units produced in 2024. And that's why Ukraine's successful strike against the airbase was so important, because it's bases like these from which Putin launches glide bombs. Engels is close enough to the Ukraine's war front lines that its bombers can take to the skies and launch these terrifying weapons without coming close enough to Ukraine itself to be at risk of getting shot down by the country's anti-air defenses. By taking out Engels, Ukraine has also destroyed one of the launching points for some of Putin's most devastating attacks. If it's taken out some of the jets that launch these bombs, that's already great news. But as early reports indicate, it also seems like Ukraine destroyed an ammunition storage facility at Engels with its drone attack. You won't need 3 guesses to figure out what weapons were most likely being stored at those facilities. Relieving the glide bomb threat is a major win for Ukraine on multiple fronts. In terms of civilian casualties, taking out Engels, even temporarily, means its citizens can breathe a little easier. Fewer of them will die if Ukraine ramps up its drone attacks to target similar air bases within Russia. On the military front, the destruction of key assets at Engels also relieves pressure on the front lines. When Putin isn't pelting Ukraine's civilian infrastructure with glide bombs, he's using them to devastate the country's fortifications in regions where Ukraine is actively fighting Russia. Mitigating the threat these bombs present allows Ukraine's ground forces to focus more of their collective energy on Russian troops. And this strike couldn't come soon enough. Ukraine has spent much of the war trying to figure out the glide bomb problem. The weapon's simple satellite navigation systems make them immune to many of the jamming techniques used to send drones and cruise missiles astray. In that sense, a Russian glide bomb's primitive nature is also one of its biggest advantages. Russia is losing that advantage. Attacks like the one Ukraine conducted in Engels are taking out Russia's glide bomb stockpiles and the aircraft used to launch those bombs. They're also serving as a warning to Putin that his airfields aren't safe. Similar attacks in the future could force Russia's leader to pull his air force further back, rendering glide bombs useless. And if that doesn't work, it seems like Ukraine has finally figured out how to jam the signals Russia uses to keep its glide bombs on track. That's according to Forbes, which said on March 17th that Ukraine has figured out how to use some form of electronic warfare system that messes with the glide bomb's satellite navigation system. The result? It's now taking Russia between 8 and 16 glide bombs to hit a target where one would have done the job just a few months ago. Putin is going to need that extra 50% of bombs he intends to build in 2025, especially if Ukraine combines this new jamming technology with more assaults on Russian air bases. So this is clearly a massive win for Ukraine. There's just one minor problem. As ABC reported, it seems that Ukraine's attack on Engels also involved the destruction of an oil depot serving the airbase. That could be an issue. On March 18th, US President Donald Trump held a phone call with Putin to discuss the terms of a ceasefire agreement Trump negotiated with Zelensky days prior. Putin didn't agree to a full ceasefire. However, he did agree to immediately stop all attacks against Ukraine's energy infrastructure for 30 days, as long as Ukraine agreed to do the same. On the surface, it may seem like Ukraine's assault on the Engels oil depot just broke the terms of the ceasefire. That isn't the case. Despite the Kremlin's claims that Putin ordered an immediate ceasefire, Russia bombed Ukrainian energy infrastructure in Sloviansk around an hour after the phone call ended. That attack left thousands of Ukrainian civilians without electricity or heating. The reality is that Putin never intended to stick to his own ceasefire. He broke it almost instantly. Ukraine's attack on Engels sends a clear message to Russia's leader. You may be able to lie to Trump, but every attack you send our way will be met with one that's just as devastating. And devastating is the correct word. In a single drone strike, Ukraine has laid waste to the Engels airfield, taken out key Russian munitions, potentially destroyed some strategic bombers, and set an oil depot ablaze. That's a powerful counterpunch if ever there was one. But what do you think about what Ukraine achieved in Engels? Are we going to see more attacks like these by Ukraine, despite the Trump-negotiated ceasefire still technically being in place? What airbase do you see Ukraine targeting next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for up-to-date information on the latest Ukrainian military innovations. We strive to be an accurate, up-to-date source of news surrounding major conflicts, and we greatly appreciate your support.